Leanne Barnes. Thanks for joining us.
It's fabulous to be here, and I brought my whales with me.
They look fantastic in the background there, the whales.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about your own water polo career and playing career.
Well, I started playing water polo in Victoria in the 1970s, and Victoria then was a bit of a powerhouse of water polo. Played in my first interstate championships in 1976, and that was my first team. Came away with a win, which is always fantastic. Never saw another one of those in the years to come. And I first got into the Australian team in 1978. So we went off to the first experience for a World Championships. That was in Berlin in 1978. And we were a demonstration sport. So we got to sit in the stands and watch the opening ceremony. But we played as part of that program. And that was, look, it ignited a flame for all of us, I think, in terms of we now need to be formal, be really on the journey. And the international push to get that to a World Cup, World Championships, Olympic Games started around that time, and Australia was a key player in that place with Paul Gare, who was a coach for a short time of the Australian team and a manager, was involved in that international push at that time. And sadly, Paul didn't live to see, that final realisation of the Olympic journey. 1979, we played in Merced, and that was the first formal World Cup for women's water polo. It was a tough journey and a tough games. Maureen O'Toole Purcell, who of course has been playing out here, she played in that 78, 79, 80 period, and then of course came back and played in 2000. But when I was going away to World Cup in 1980, and it was in Holland, I think the real flame was ignited in me, because so many people said, "Are you going off to the Olympics?" And I would say, "No, I'm going to a World Cup, not an Olympics." And a couple of years later, I took over from Paul on that international committee when I stepped down from playing. Well, I was stood down from playing in 1982. I was getting a bit old, maybe, and went on to that international women's committee, which had representatives from Holland, the United States, Canada in particular, starting the journey to see what we had to do to get over that step. So that's the sort of start of my journey. And I was with the Australian team in the role of manager, sort of coached a little bit in 82 at World Championships, and then took over as manager of the team in 83 with the wonderful Ian Trent as our coach. And of course, we won the 84 World Cup, and then the first official World Championships in Madrid in 1986, and then we sort of kept on pushing from there.
And Leanne, tell us about being a proud Victorian and how great it was having Joe Fox in that team in 2000, and also having the current Australian team captain as a Victorian, Rowie Webster.
Absolutely. I think Victoria has had a strong history in water polo, and we've always had a small number of players, but very dominant players. I wasn't one of them, I was there as a player, but people like Lisa Flav, people like obviously Joe, who was a junior and went to Junior World Championships in 99, got a gold medal, went to the World Cup in 99, got a silver medal, and then went to the Olympics in 2000. Absolutely fantastic. And, I'm so proud of what Joe has done and continues to do in water polo, but Rowie is just amazing too. She really understands the history and where the sport has come from. She instills and works on a culture in the team, and I think her leadership through this period when, the Tokyo Olympics have been put on hold, and keeping that team together and working as they are as a pretty strong unit, now looking to the future, has been fabulous. So I'm really proud of those Victorian girls.
And Leanne, if you fast forward from 1980, where it really lit the flame, as you said, you were going away to the World Cup and people were asking you whether you were going away to the Moscow Olympic Games. If you fast forward to 1993 with those famous words from Juan Antonio Semerance, the winner is Sydney, how did that feel as you realised that you're still on this journey for women's water polo and it wasn't included yet?
Oh, look, in '84, we'd been a demonstration sport and a games at the Olympics, and we played in the Pepperdine pool, and the girls got to stand on the podium. We won the World Cup in Los Angeles that year. We thought '88 will be there for sure, and the IOC and FINA kept on saying you've got to be played on 5 continents. You've got to have so many teams participating. You've got to have so many teams qualifying to come to World Cup and World Championships. Every time we'd be given a list of criteria we had to meet, there'd be a reason why things weren't progressing. And I think we'd always held hope that 1996 Atlanta Olympics would get over the line. The US Olympic president was Dr. Ralph Hale, very involved in water polo. They're very strong sticklers, for equity in sport, equitable representation, and they'd got the women's marathon into Olympic Games. So we thought, yeah, we're across the line. And when that didn't happen and wasn't on the agenda, so when we heard Sydney, we just went, yeah, we can do it. So I was working within Australian water polo. Pat Jones obviously was, ticking along and working with me. She and I used to speak daily, and then sometimes we get so, distraught we wouldn't speak for a week, but then we'd just all get back on board. And I think we just saw that this is going to happen in Australia. No matter what we do, we'll look at every avenue. And so I think that really was the big lift in put away all those rules, or we've got to meet this and meet that. We're going to make it happen here in Australia.
And it really was a united front from the whole of Australian water polo and also the AOC. The John Coates, some of the influential people in Australian water polo, the Phil Bowers, the Peter Kerrs, the Ross Coggins, all were so supportive of getting it included.
Look, absolutely. I called John Coates my knight in shining armour. He was absolutely amazing. And I think that Australian water polo, John Whitehouse, Peter Kerr, Peter Montgomery, when you look at, and even Tom Hode, like a lot of people in those days were saying Tom's only about men's water polo, but I think he saw that the journey to get women's water polo into the Olympic Games wouldn't get across the line if, and if that didn't happen, men's water polo was then potentially on a rocky path because it didn't have a women's complement and synchronized swimming is not the female sport of men's water polo. So, we had fantastic support. John Coates wrote letters and letters, Peter Montgomery, they went through those processes. And I remember John Coates saying he looked into the eyes of those players when they were presenting, and Pat had got up the push very publicly. He looked in the eyes of those players and he said, there's no reason why these women at the top of their game should not be in the Olympic Games in 2000. Got to love a good lawyer, but we had a few of them on our sides and they were working down that pathway. So they just know how to negotiate.
And I believe at one moment in the 90s for you, when you actually you met the Dalai Lama, that's when you thought, yeah, this is going to happen.
Oh, look, John Whitehouse and I were waiting in a hotel foyer in Sydney to do a presentation to IOC and FINA representatives, and you're sitting there, and it was at a time when the Dalai Lama was visiting Australia, and there was just this amazing calm, that came into the foyer, and the Dalai Lama and a group of his supporting monks walked through, and it was almost like this calm settled over the room, and I went, yep, I just get a sense that, what is it? Might isn't right, right is right. And I just got that sense we're on a pathway here.
And then tell us about the lead up to the games and being blessed to work on a home games on a sport that you are so passionate about and played, working as part of the so-called organising committee.
Look, that was just the feather, I suppose, in the journey to be able to be there, to look after all the overseas visitors and to be there as part of that journey, to be involved in part of the handing of blazers to the team as part of that, because normally that is that conferral of blazers is done by former Olympic players, and of course there weren't any in women's water polo. We had people like Kathy Parks and Karen Wade, Karen Kerr, some of the Jones family there to help work through, Rebecca Foxton work through handing over those blazers. So it was fabulous. And I suppose to a certain extent, even the fact that I had a SOCOG uniform, I felt like I was, you know, part of the process. And my family have very much been a part of this, you know, journey with me. My daughter was born in '92, and we went all the way through that game. She and my husband moved up to Sydney with me, so we were living across the road from the Ryde Pool. And so being there and being able to sit next to the Prime Minister, you know, there was Peter Kerr and myself either side of the Prime Minister during that gold medal game. One of the things that's sort of been coming up to me this week, watching all the photos of those wonderful girls of that year, just doing the most amazing thing and winning those gold, was they were holding gold roses wrapped in cellophane. Well, my daughter and I got up at 6 o'clock on that gold medal day. We went and bought the roses, we sprayed them gold and wrapped them in cellophane. And I'd forgotten about them until this week, and I was having a laugh with Amy about it the other day. We'd gone out and I had them in a basket underneath my feet up in the stands. And I was thinking, oh my God, you know, came to those last couple of seconds. I thought, I've mozzed them. I've got these gold roses. I'm going to have to give them to the friggin' Yanks. And so I'm sitting there with them, and the Prime Minister knew that they were there. And when the team won, he said, go down. So I grabbed my basket of gold roses and went down and gave them to the team. My husband and Dennis and Amy were sitting in the stands on the other side. And my husband looked around, and this journey had been all a part of Amy's life, looked around at Amy, and she just had tears, as I know a lot of people in the stands did, rolling down her face. So that working for SOCOG, being there as part of that process and having those opportunities really was a culmination. And for me, I look back at Amy's life and she'd sort of, you know, enjoyed and not enjoyed water polo because it took me away to do things or whatever. But being on a journey, having persistence and being committed to something and seeing the right outcome, I think is a really good lesson for all of us out of that time.
And it is an amazing lesson in life that the journey actually started many, many years before it actually came to fruition. You've described very accurately from 84 all the way onwards at the Olympic Games and the near misses. Tell us a little bit more about that particular night, sitting next to the Prime Minister, who we all know was a sport-loving Prime Minister, when Yvette Higgins slotted that winning goal into the back of the net.
Wow, you know, it was amazing because sort of Kuro and I were sort of sitting down, but John Howard had been to a number of other games. So we knew him and we'd been through those processes, and absolutely he was sport mad, but loved the women's water polo team. Well, he jumped up like this, and at that stage, I'm sort of sitting there, and there was this photo that was on the front page of the newspapers down in Victoria that my mum loves, of me being next to John Howard. But I nearly had my head knocked off because he just went like this, and I'm thinking, whoa! He protected the flowers, didn't he? I was quite happy about my roses. They were under my feet, but yeah, he jumped up. It was so exciting. And I think there was a little bit of confusion. You know, Guy and the Yanks were looking at what's happening. You know, was a little bit of concern and whatever. But I think most of us knew, well, it's just right. And for me, the fact that the journey to the Olympic Games had been really pushed by the Dutch, the Australians, the USA and Canada, it was really fitting that those 4 teams were in the 6, only 6 teams that played in 2000. It was really fitting that there was, 2 of those 4 teams were in the gold medal match. And for us, because we're the ones that got it over the line at the end of the day with, John Coates and Pat and all the work that we'd done, it was also right that we won that gold medal. So it was, a justification, I think, as John Coates said earlier on one of your programs here, justification for the journey was that, the right things happened at the end.
And let's go back a step to the semi-final against Russia. You have a great.
Do we have to? Oh my God, that was the most stressful game, and man.
You have a great admiration for the players and the team themselves, and I think the determination and the will to win really shone out in that last quarter. Tell us a little bit about where you had your heart in your mouth.
Wow, unbelievable. You know, that team, those 13 players and the players that have been in the squad had the most amazing sense of each other. They were a real team, and they were committed, and they supported, you know, Istvan and Sharon and Jackie and Gary, and, you know, Jeanette, Floss. You know, they really pulled a great process around them, and they were there for each other. They knew, I think, when we went into that last quarter, and when they came out and Debbie scored that goal, I thought, okay, we can do this now. Going in, what was, because they were low scoring games in 2000. So going in and having that deficit, and then that first goal, and I thought, that team are so much there for each other. It was tough. The Russians are very, very dogged and heavy in their game, and our players tend to be, I think that 2000 team had some beautiful water polo players, as our team in 86 did. They had very skillful players, and to a certain extent the Russians tried to drag us away from being able to play that skilled, beautiful water polo, and I think that in that last quarter, whatever Istvan and the coaching support staff and those girls said to each other, they just instilled in each other the fact that we're here and we're going to do it. And it flowed through those 3 goals. You know, Bridget's goal I thought was amazing. And you look back at that time, it's fabulous being able to see the footage of it. But it was my most stressful day of the whole Olympic Games. And it was far less stressful in the gold medal game, because I sort of knew that we're on a pattern thing. That semi-finals, if we hadn't got in to be on the dais, I think, you know, like in terms of those processes and in that way, I would have been really, really devastating.
In the modern sporting area, a lot gets talked about legacy, and legacy gets bandied around a lot. But for you, how does it feel being such a significant contributor to the legacy of women's water polo in Australia, now being a very high-profile Olympic sport?
I think I share that with players, coaches, people that have been on the journey. I think one thing about water polo for me is that it's very much a team sport in and out of the water, and we're all part of a very large family. So I still have friends and close friends from the 1970s, 80s, 90s. And so I think I don't see it as me being so much a part of that legacy. And I don't think any of us do. I think it's really that we as a sport are, and that, you know, bringing through a culture, a team approach. You know, there was teams in the 90s that were really working through that process. Dave Woods and the team that won the silver medal in 91, you know, David Neesham and the team that won the gold medal in 1995 at the World Cup in Sydney. You know, there's family members there. There's, you know, you mentioned Phil Bauer before. There's all of those people that are still there working hard to promote and to drive the game. Ian Trent. I think we're all part of a family that really contributes to put a support around a national team, and that very much happened in 2000. That team was special, as had all of the teams before that been. They've got a very, very close association with each other now. I feel for them this week a bit, because with the COVID border closures, you know, they can't all get together. They've been very good over the years. I quite often love looking at their Facebook posts about, you know, their celebrations and getting together. That's a bit of a challenge now. You've got, you know, Joe and Floss down in Victoria. You've got a group in Sydney. You've got some over in Western Australia, some up in Queensland. So being part of that legacy is, I celebrate. I live vicariously a little bit by them. I looked at some of the games in 2000 and people said to me, don't you wish you could have played at the Olympics? And I went, oh, I'm quite happy doing what I did. You know, when I did it, I don't need to be there. But I'm really glad that those young women had a chance to do that and to achieve that. And they were so inspirational in so many of the players that have come through in the 2000s up till today. So, you know, you'll know that either there were players or coaches that were around that team or coming through at that time that were inspired by that. And that's part of the legacy. I hope that the inspiration to stay with water polo, to get into water polo, to continue to contribute, keeps on going. And you see that now with the team that's there at the moment. You know, you've got Zoe Arancini, her mother played in the World Championships team and the World Cup teams in the 80s that won gold medals. She's there, she knows that history. You've got the players around, you know, you've got Beck Rippon as an assistant coach, you've got Bronwyn Mayer there. So you've got that whole process. And I hope that's the legacy, that we continue to focus on all being there for each other and our sport and seeing it progress into the future.
Leanne, you mentioned it being a big family, the water polo community. You certainly have been an amazing, selfless contributor to the water polo community over many, many years. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. It was a joy to be here, and go that 2000 team. And let me tell you, go that 2021 Tokyo team. We will all be there supporting them on what's been a 5-year cycle. But I hope that 2000 team get a chance to, at least in a Zoom room, all get together and celebrate this week. It was an amazing achievement that they did, and it's been a joy joining with you today.